Where does DeAndre Hopkins play in 2023? He's given us a list of teams he'll play for and a list of teams he will not want to play for. Is it up to him? Will he even get moved? Could the Cardinals keep him? We don't know. The Fantasy Football Show, it begins right now.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Take a lap.
DeAndre Hopkins tweeted this out yesterday, which was retweeted by Ian Rappaport. Hopkins says, quote, Hopkins doesn't want to raise, sign Nuke. Essentially barking back, clapping back at the media that continue to paint a narrative about him that he's going to demand a new contract if he gets traded. Hopkins is clearly sending a message here saying, hey, look, I'm not a diva. I'm not a bother. Come get me. I mean, if he said, hey, look, I want a big payday. I want a big fat raise, and I'm going to cost draft capital, his suitors won't come a-knocking. And that might be the problem for Nuke. He hasn't been getting any bites because teams may think, okay, this guy wants a new contract. We got to give up draft capital. He's an older wide receiver. So he's trying to make it easy for teams that have interest in him. Hey, I'm not going to ask for new money. I just want to go somewhere where I can win, chase a ring. On the All Things Covered podcast, Hopkins was asked to play a little game, a little name game, to give a positive or negative nod or response to the teams that were going to be thrown at him as far as landing spots or potential landing spots. When asked about the Jets and Patriots, he pretty much balked at the idea of going to those locations. When KC and Buffalo were mentioned, he gave a pretty positive response, so we know he wants to go there. The question is, does he have a choice? Not really. Especially if he's not seeking out a new contract. He's under contract. Even if he didn't want to go to the Jets per se, it's not like he's in a contract year. It's not like he's franchise tagged. It's not like a team's going to say, oh, well, we're not going to trade for him if we can't work out a long-term deal. Teams that acquire him don't want another deal. They want the deal he's currently on. They want to rent a player for a year. Buffalo, KC to win a championship. The Jets to win a championship. New England, they're not going to probably be all that interested because they can't win a championship, not anytime soon. Sorry, New England fans. I should have warned you to put your earmuffs on. Again, the only leverage a player would have is in the case of, think back to Tyreek Hill. He's getting franchise tagged. He's got to sign a new long-term deal. No acquiring team is going to actually execute the trade unless Tyreek Hill wanted to go to their team and want to ink a new big fat contract, because you're giving up draft capital for a player that may not want to re-sign with you and is going to create a headache for you. With Hopkins, he's already on a contract. Nobody's going to want to re-up him. He's got one good year left, maybe two, but teams are going to say, probably one. No leverage. No real leverage at all. Merely a list of teams that he wishes to play for. So breaking down these landing spots, Kansas City would be pretty good. I don't know that I want it because I want Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney to have a chance to be a big-time breakout candidate. But if you're a Patrick Mahomes fantasy owner, you want this trade. You want Hopkins catching footballs from Patty Mahomes. If you're a DeAndre Hopkins owner in fantasy, redraft, or dynasty, you want this trade. You want Patty Mahomes throwing dimes to DeAndre Hopkins. If you're Josh Allen, you want Hopkins in Buffalo. If you're a Diggs owner, not a real good move. Diggs already has some concern for the long term as he gets older, and the idea of Hopkins coming in to crowd up the wide receiver room, it only helps Buffalo, so from a football perspective, it's an amazing move. It's almost dumb not to do it. It's borderline incompetence for KC or the Buffalo Bills to not make a trade that brings Nuke in for a second or even a third round pick, and it also is a defense move so that the other one doesn't do it. If you're the Chiefs, you almost want to do it just to prevent the Buffalo Bills or the Bengals or the Eagles from doing it, or the Chicago Bears. Same thing for the Bills. You don't want the Kansas City Chiefs to get DeAndre Hopkins. Go get him so they can't. Go D-Hop block him. New England would be a disaster unless the Patriots got Lamar. I've made it very clear that I don't want Lamar in New England. I don't want Anthony Richardson in New England unless they get a wide receiver like Hopkins, unless they draft a wide receiver like JSN. So Hopkins in New England with Mac Jones and Zappy, death sentence for a wide receiver. Hopkins in New York, bad for Garrett Wilson. It can't be good for him. Great for Aaron Rodgers. Great for the New York Jets. Great football move. If you're the New York Jets, it's borderline incompetent not to go get this guy, to not only improve your team, but to block every other team from doing it. Look, Hopkins is a big name. For all the wide receivers involved in a potential trade, the wide receivers specifically on the team that's acquiring them, they're going to get impacted by DeAndre Hopkins falling on the roster. The quarterbacks are all getting bumps, but the wide receivers, look out. And the only reason New England wide receivers aren't getting impacted is because There are no good New England wide receivers. Where Hopkins goes, your guess is as good as mine, but I think the Cardinals are probably apt to move him because they're in a year where it's kind of not a rebuild year, but in between a rebuild year, a kind of wait and see year, a kind of let Kyler Murray get healthy and maybe scrap 2023 kind of year. And for that reason, because Hopkins has that 1, maybe 2 years left, trading him and getting something to help support Kyler, to help protect Kyler, that's probably the name of the game right now for the Cardinals. So the Cardinals are going to look to move him. They could move him on draft day. They could move him in conjunction with the number 3 overall pick. They could move down from the number 3 overall pick, then move back up using Hopkins. There's so many options that are on the table. And the NFL draft adds a whole nother component. Could be a draft day trade. Hopkins, who turns 31, has played 10 seasons in the NFL. And if we look at his 2022 numbers, they're not great at a glance, but if you extrapolate the data out on 9 games across 17, he would have had over 100 receptions by far. Actually 120 to be exact. And the 717 yards extrapolated out over the course of 17 games is 1354. 120 receptions in 1354. Honestly, I didn't know what the numbers were going to look like until I just did that live. 120 receptions for 1354. Now, granted, his 3 TDs would be about 5 across 17 games. That's not really his fault. You got to think if he goes to Buffalo. One more year of Hopkins, 70, 80 receptions. We'll call it 75, 990 and 10 scores if he has a bad receiving year. Kansas City, call it 80 receptions for 1,000, 8 touchdowns. I mean, those are like worst case scenarios if Hopkins plays 17 games. That's if we're expecting kind of a fall. I honestly was going to come in here and say that I think his ADP is way too high because he does fall in round 4 sometimes. And I don't know that I love him in 4. I'd rather go after Christian Watson, Drake London, Jahmyr Gibbs if I'm going RB, any one of the top 5 quarterbacks from Burrow and Fields on up. But I don't mind this data right here. I kind of feel like if you could get him and steal him around the top of 5, that'd be okay in a new environment. In Arizona, I don't know that I like him in round 5. That means I'm waiting to see what happens, but we might not have to wait too long because he could get traded, like I said, before or on draft day. It feels very likely at this point. If I had to throw out my guesswork percentage on whether he gets traded before or during the NFL draft, I'd say 70%, but hey, keep in mind the 30% can still bite you. Let me know where you think Hopkins is going to play football in 2023. Let me know if you do think he has any leverage or doesn't have any leverage. And get ready for more fantasy football content because your boy is live Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern every single Monday through Friday. I'm live whenever news breaks, and I'm live Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, about midnight to 12:30 Eastern, where we do draft after draft, mock draft, live best ball draft. Promo code Smitty. The link in the description adds the promo code for you. Get up to $100 bonus match on your first deposit, but make sure you're ready to go using that link and promo code Smitty so that when we draft on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at midnight, you're ready to rumble. Do it ahead of time. Get out of here.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.